Rain had been pounding on the roof of the Devereaux family home since early morning, turning the spring day into a dreary gray canvas. A patrol car pulled up to the curb, splashing muddy puddles. Officer Ray Morris adjusted his cap and hurried toward the house from which the call about the unnatural silence and neighbors' concerns had come. The door was ajar. Already on the threshold, Morris sensed something was wrong. His hand automatically reached for his holster. "Baltimore police, is anyone home?" His voice echoed off the walls. No one answered. Following protocol, the officer cautiously moved forward, checking room by room. The living room looked untouched. A sofa with scattered pillows, a coffee table with a cup of cold tea, family photos on the walls. The kitchen also seemed normal, except for the half-eaten breakfast on the table. The bedroom greeted him with thick silence and the dim light of drawn curtains. It was here that Morris found the body. Tamika Devereaux lay on the bed, her face frozen in a grimace of surprise and horror, her eyes wide open, as if she couldn't believe what was happening even in the last moments of her life. A medical stethoscope was wrapped around the victim's neck, tightened so tightly that it cut into her flesh. Morris called for backup and the crime scene investigators. Less than an hour later, the crime scene was swarming with police officers and experts. The last to arrive was Detective Ezra Cobb, the lead investigator of the homicide department. A tall man with graying temples and a piercing gaze, he had a reputation for not giving up until he found the truth. "What do we have here?" Cobb asked, putting on rubber gloves. Forensic expert Janice Williams looked up from examining the body. "Female, approximately 35 years old, African American. Preliminary cause of death is strangulation. Time of death is between 10 p.m. last night and 2 a.m. this morning. There are signs of a struggle. Skin fragments found under the fingernails, probably belonging to the attacker." Cobb approached the body. Despite years of working with violent deaths, the sight of the victim still made him feel sick. "A stethoscope. Interesting," he muttered. "Did someone want to send a message, or was it just handy?" "There's something else," Williams added. "The victim was pregnant about 5 months." Cobb froze. The murder of a pregnant woman was always considered a double crime, as if someone had crossed an invisible line even in a world of violence. "Identified? Tamika Devereaux, 35 years old, nurse at Hope Clinic on the East Side. Her ID was in her purse," replied one of the officers. The detective looked around the room. On the nightstand was a photograph of a happy couple, the victim and presumably her husband. They were smiling against the backdrop of the ocean, but the happy image now seemed a stark contrast to reality. "Husband?" asked Cobb. "Jabari Devereaux, 37 years old. Works as a mechanic at Master Motors on Lexington Street. He's been called and should be here soon." Cobb nodded and continued his examination. The bathroom showed signs of a struggle, an overturned laundry basket, scattered cosmetics. A towel lay on the floor, as if someone had wiped their hands in a hurry. The perpetrator was clearly in a rush and didn't care much about hiding the evidence. Returning to the bedroom, the detective noticed a woman's handbag on a chair. He methodically went through its contents: a wallet, keys, a makeup bag, a phone, and a sealed envelope from the speed test medical laboratory. "Check the victim's phone," Cobb ordered. "Calls, messages, contacts, anything that might give us a lead." At that moment, there was a commotion on the first floor. Cobb went downstairs and saw a tall man desperately trying to push past a security officer. "Let me through! This is my house! Where's my wife?" he shouted. "Mr. Devereaux?" Cobb addressed him calmly. "I'm Detective Ezra Cobb from the Homicide Division. I'm very sorry, but—" Jabari Devereaux froze when he heard the word homicide. His face contorted with horror and disbelief. No, this can't be. Please sit down," Cobb suggested, pointing to the sofa in the living room. Jabari collapsed onto the seat, his large body suddenly seeming small and defenseless. Cobb noticed that the knuckles of the man's fingers were worn down, and there was a faint scratch on his face. "Can I see her?" Jabari asked in a trembling voice. "Not yet," Cobb replied gently. "First, I need to ask you a few questions. When was the last time you saw your wife?" Jabari swallowed. "Yesterday morning, before work. I left at 7:30, and she was still at home, getting ready for her morning shift at the clinic." "Did you talk to her during the day?" "Yes, I called her around noon just to check on her." His voice faltered. She said everything was fine, but her voice sounded strange, as if she had been crying. Cobb watched the man closely. Jabari clenched and unclenched his fists, his eyes darting around the room, never resting on the detective for more than a second. "Where were you last night between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m.? Jabari tensed. "At Jimmy's bar with some friends. Then I went to my brother Lamont's place on the west side. I stayed there for the night." He raised his head. "You think I killed my wife? My pregnant wife?" "We're just gathering information, Mr. Devereaux," Cobb replied neutrally. "Did you know your wife was 5 months pregnant?" "Of course I knew. We'd been trying to have a baby for a long time." His face contorted for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "It was going to be a boy. We were going to name him Malik." Cobb made a note in his notebook. "Did your wife mention any problems? Threats? Maybe someone was following her?" Jabari shook his head, but then paused. She seemed tense in the last few weeks. She said she was going through a difficult period at work. I thought it was because of the pregnancy and fatigue." "What about your marriage? Did you two argue?" Jabari looked up sharply. "Who doesn't? Yes, we argued, like all couples, but I loved her." His voice broke. "I would never hurt her." At that moment, one of the officers called to Cobb. "Detective, the neighbors want to talk to you." Cobb nodded and, apologizing to Jabari, went out onto the porch, where an elderly woman and a young man were waiting for him. "Mrs. Johnson, she lives across the street," the officer introduced the woman, "and Mr. Terry, the neighbor on the left." "I heard screaming," Mrs. Johnson began immediately. "Last night, around 9 o'clock. They've been arguing a lot lately, sometimes so loud that I had to close my windows." "What were they arguing about?" Cobb asked. "I can't say for sure, but I often heard a man's name, Lamont or something like that." Cobb made a note. "Anything else?" "Jabari was shouting something about your doctor and your child. I thought it was just a domestic dispute. If I'd known." She shook her head. "And you, Mr. Terry?" The young man shifted from one foot to the other. "I saw Jabari last night around 11. He came home, slammed the car door. He looked furious. I was walking my dog and said hello, but he didn't even notice me." "At 11? Cobb repeated. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. I was watching the end of a basketball game and it ended at 10:55. This contradicted Jabari's statement that he had spent the night at his brother's house. Cobb thanked the neighbors and returned to the house. One of the forensic technicians met him in the hallway. "Detective, you have to see this." He was holding a plastic bag with evidence, inside which was an envelope from the speed test lab. "We opened it. The results are positive. Tamika Devereaux was HIV positive." Cobb felt the pieces of the puzzle begin to fall into place, although the big picture was still elusive. "Was the envelope sealed?" "Yes, it looks like she hadn't seen the results yet." Cobb nodded thoughtfully. "Check if her husband knew about this. And I need information about a doctor named Lamont who is associated with the Hope Clinic." He turned back to Jabari, who was sitting staring at a single point. "Mr. Devereaux, who is Lamont?" Jabari flinched, a shadow passing over his face. "Lamont Kingsley. Dr. Lamont Kingsley, Tamika's gynecologist at the Hope Clinic." He paused. "They went to medical school together. They had an affair back then, a long time ago before me. And now?" Cobb asked quietly. Jabari clenched his fists. "They worked together. They said they were just colleagues and friends." His eyes narrowed. "But I saw the way he looked at her, the way she smiled at him. Always too much laughter, too much touching for just friends." "Did you suspect there was something between them?" Jabari stared straight ahead. "I knew she started changing after he showed up at the clinic 6 months ago. She became distant. And then she got pregnant after 3 years of trying." Cobb watched the man closely. "Did you doubt that the child was yours?" Jabari's face contorted in pain. I don't know. We tried for so many years, and then suddenly, so soon after he showed up." He fell silent, then raised his head abruptly. "I loved her. No matter what happened, I loved her." Cobb decided to change the subject. Mr. Devereaux, a neighbor saw you here yesterday around 11 o'clock at night, not at your brother's place. Jabari paled. I stopped by for a minute to pick up my phone charger. Then I went to my brother's. The workshop says you didn't show up for work today, Cobb added, bluffing. I had the day off. Cobb nodded, though he wasn't convinced. We'll check that out. Now tell me again where you were last night, step by step. While Jabari recounted his version of events, now with a lot more details, Cobb pondered the information he had received. A pregnant woman, possible infidelity, a former lover who became a colleague, HIV-positive status that she may not have known about, and a husband who was clearly lying about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. The forensic team continued to work, gathering evidence and photographing every corner of the house. Tamika's body was carefully wrapped and prepared for transport to the morgue for an autopsy. Cobb knew that this was only the beginning of a long investigation that would destroy more than one life before the truth came out. And yet, looking at Jabari's lost expression, his damaged hands, and hearing his contradictory statements, the detective had already begun to form a theory about what had happened in that house last night. But he was an experienced police officer and knew that first impressions were often wrong. He needed proof, not guesswork. "Officer," he said to the patrolman, "invite Mr. Devereaux to the station for further questioning, and contact this Dr. Kingsley. I want to talk to him as soon as possible." The Hope Clinic was located in an old, renovated red brick building at the intersection of Monroe Street and Fifth Avenue. Sunlight filtered through the clouds, turning large raindrops into golden sparks. Detective Ezra Cobb parked his patrol car in the staff parking lot and paused for a moment to look at the facade. Patients and medical staff came and went through the glass doors, unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded the day before in the family of one of their colleagues. Inside, the clinic was bright and spacious, decorated in soft pastel colors with soothing music playing from the speakers. A young woman with long braids and a friendly smile sat at the reception desk, which faded when Cobb introduced himself and showed his badge. "I need to speak with Dr. Lamont Kingsley," Cobb said, "and with the clinic's management." The woman looked at him for a few seconds, then nodded and picked up the phone. While she spoke quietly to someone, Cobb surveyed the clinic lobby. Diplomas and certificates hung on the walls, along with photos of the medical staff. He quickly found a photo of Tamika Devereaux. She was standing in a group of nurses, smiling at the camera with professional confidence. Another photo showed a middle-aged black man in a white coat with a neat beard and a penetrating gaze. The caption read, "Dr. Lamont Kingsley, obstetrician gynecologist." "Detective," a woman's voice sounded behind him. "I'm Dr. Marcia Wilkins, the chief physician at the clinic. What's going on?" Cobb turned and saw a tall woman in her 50s with short graying hair and a stern expression. "I'm afraid I have bad news, Dr. Wilkins. Tamika Devereaux was found dead in her home this morning." The chief physician's face froze and her eyes widened in shock. "My God, was it an accident?" "No, it's being investigated as a homicide." Dr. Wilkins covered her mouth with her hand. "Come into my office, please," she said, pointing to the door at the end of the hallway. In the chief physician's office, Cobb briefly explained the circumstances surrounding the discovery of the body, omitting the most gruesome details. Dr. Wilkins listened with her shoulders slumped, occasionally shaking her head as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Tamika was an excellent nurse," she said finally. "Professional, caring. The patients adored her." "How long had she been working here?" "Almost 8 years. She joined us right after she graduated from nursing school." "And Dr. Kingsley?" Dr. Wilkins tensed slightly. "Dr. Kingsley joined us about 6 months ago. He's an excellent practitioner with a lot of experience." "Did they know each other before they started working together?" The chief physician paused, searching for the right words. "Yes, they went to school together, but I don't see how that's relevant." "I'd like to speak with Dr. Kingsley," Cobb interrupted, "and, if possible, with one of Tamika's close colleagues." Dr. Wilkins nodded. "Dr. Kingsley is with a patient right now. He'll be available in 15 minutes. Nzinga Walters is the head nurse and a close friend of Tamika's. I'll ask her to join you." While waiting in a small staff lounge, Cobb studied the bulletin board with its announcements and photographs. His attention was drawn to a group photo from a company party. Tamika was standing next to a man whom Cobb recognized as Dr. Kingsley. They weren't touching, but something about their posture, the way they stood a little closer than a formal colleague would, made the detective take mental note. "Detective Cobb?" He turned and saw a petite woman with beautiful, expressive eyes. Nzinga Walters looked tearful but dignified. "Dr. Wilkins told me about Tamika," she said quietly. "I still can't believe it." Cobb motioned for her to sit down. "My condolences, Miss Walters. I understand you were close to Tamika." Nzinga nodded, clutching a handkerchief. "We worked together since she came to the clinic. We became friends almost immediately." She looked up at the detective. "Who could have done this to her?" "We're investigating." Cobb opened his notebook. "Tell me about Tamika and Dr. Kingsley." Nzinga tensed slightly. "What exactly are you interested in?" "Everything. Their relationship, how they interacted at work. I know they knew each other before they started working together." Nzinga sighed. "Yes, they went to medical school together. They were close at one time." "How close?" "They had a relationship. Quite serious, according to Tamika. But that was a long time ago, before she met Jabari." "And what happened? Why did they break up?" Nzinga looked down at her hands. "Lamont got a residency offer in Chicago. Tamika didn't want to leave Baltimore. Her family and roots were here. They broke up but remained friends." "And when did Dr. Kingsley return to Baltimore and start working here?" 6 months ago. Tamika was happy he came back. She always spoke warmly of him." Cobb made a note in his notebook. "Did many people at the clinic know about their past relationship?" Nzinga smiled. "The medical community is like a small town. Everyone knows everything. Of course, there was talk, especially when Lamont first arrived here, but they always conducted themselves professionally." "Were there rumors that their relationship had rekindled?" Nzinga hesitated, and Cobb realized he had touched on a sensitive subject. "People love to gossip," she finally said, "especially when they see a man and a woman who get along well and have a past together. But was there any basis for the gossip?" Nzinga straightened up. "Look, I know where you're going with this. No, I don't think Tamika was cheating on her husband with Lamont. Yes, they were close friends. Yes, they sometimes had lunch together or stayed late after work to discuss patients. But Tamika loved her husband and was thrilled to be pregnant." Cobb nodded. "How long ago did Tamika find out she was pregnant?" "About 4 months ago. She was on cloud 9. She and Jabari had been trying to have a baby for several years." "And how did Dr. Kingsley react to the news?" Nzinga paused for a moment. "He was happy for her. Maybe a little reserved, but that's just his nature. Lamont isn't one to show his emotions." "Did Tamika mention any problems in her marriage? Maybe Jabari was jealous of her and Dr. Kingsley?" "She never said anything directly, but—" Nzinga faltered. "She seemed tense in the last few weeks. Once I noticed a bruise on her wrist and asked her about it. She said she'd hit it on the door, but you know how that sounds?" Cobb looked at Nzinga intently. "Do you think Jabari could have been physically abusive?" "I don't know. Tamika always spoke of him with love, but after Lamont showed up at the clinic, I noticed a change. She became less open when it came to her family life." At that moment, the door opened and Dr. Kingsley entered the room. He was tall, athletic, and had impeccable posture. His dark eyes looked alert behind stylish, thin-rimmed glasses. "Detective Cobb?" His voice was deep and melodious. "Dr. Wilkins said you wanted to talk to me." Cobb stood up and shook the outstretched hand. "Yes, Dr. Kingsley. Thank you for taking the time." Nzinga stood up. "I'll get back to my duties if you don't mind." Cobb nodded. "Thank you for your help, Miss Walters. I can contact you if I have any further questions." Nzinga gave him her phone number and, glancing quickly at Dr. Kingsley, left the room. The doctor took the vacant chair, his movements precise and calculated. "Is it true? About Tamika?" he asked, trying to maintain a professional tone, but Cobb noticed the tremor in his voice. "Unfortunately, yes. Tamika Devereaux was found dead this morning. It's being investigated as a homicide." Lamont Kingsley closed his eyes for a moment, his face frozen in a mask of controlled grief. "My God, how did this happen?" "She was strangled in her own bed. The murder weapon was a medical stethoscope." Dr. Kingsley shuddered. "A stethoscope? Is that some kind of symbolism?" "Possibly. Cobb watched the doctor's reaction closely. When was the last time you saw Tamika? Yesterday afternoon at work. She left around 5 as usual. Did you notice anything unusual about her behavior? Dr. Kingsley thought for a moment. She seemed a little distracted. She said she hadn't slept well the night before. You and Tamika were quite close, I understand. Lamont tensed, but quickly regained his composure. We were colleagues and friends, yes, and former lovers. The doctor looked directly into Cobb's eyes. That was many years ago during our studies. What does that have to do with her death? Tell me about your current relationship with Tamika. Lamont squared his shoulders as if preparing for defense. As I said, we were friends and colleagues. I respected her as a professional and valued our friendship. Just friendship? What are you trying to say, detective? Cobb changed tactics. Many people at the clinic thought there was something between you. Something more than just friendship. People are always ready to assume the worst, Kingsley replied coldly. Tamika was a married woman, expecting a child. I would never have crossed that line. But you spent a lot of time together. We worked together. She was my assistant on several difficult deliveries. We had lunch together, sometimes discussed difficult patients after work. There's nothing wrong with that. Cobb paused, watching the doctor. Did you know that Jabari Devereaux was jealous of his wife and you? Lamont raised his eyebrows in surprise. I guessed he wasn't particularly happy about our friendship, but Tamika never said it was a serious problem. Where were you last night between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m.? Dr. Kingsley looked shocked. Am I a suspect? He shook his head. I was home alone, checking patient test results and reading a medical journal. Then I went to bed around midnight. Can anyone confirm that? No, I live alone. Cobb nodded and made a note in his notebook. Dr. Kingsley, Tamika recently tested positive for HIV. Did you know about that? The doctor's face paled, his eyes widening in genuine surprise. What? No, that's impossible. She was tested regularly, like all medical staff. She never tested positive. The test results were delivered to her yesterday. The envelope was left unopened. Lamont shook his head, clearly shaken. My God, that's terrible. Poor Tamika. And her baby. When was the last time the medical equipment at the clinic was inspected? The doctor frowned, not understanding the connection. We follow all safety protocols. The equipment is regularly inspected and maintained. Have there been any problems with the autoclaves recently? Lamont froze. How did you... He stopped. Yes, about 3 months ago, one of the autoclaves broke down. We discovered it during a routine inspection and replaced it immediately. All instruments were re-sterilized. Are you sure? The doctor looked concerned. They should have been. It's standard procedure. He paled even more. Do you think Tamika could have been infected here at the clinic? Cobb didn't answer directly. Do you have any photos of Tamika? Personal ones, not work ones. Dr. Kingsley hesitated, then took out his phone. A few, mostly from work events. He showed Cobb a gallery of photos. Tamika at a charity run for the clinic, at a Christmas party, at a conference. In several photos, they were together, smiling, standing close but not touching. What about text messages? Did you communicate outside of work? Sometimes. We discussed work issues, exchanged articles. Lamont hesitated. Look, we were really friends, good friends, but nothing more. Cobb nodded. Can I see your messages? Dr. Kingsley clearly hesitated, but after a pause, he unlocked his phone and opened the chat with Tamika. Cobb scrolled through the messages, mostly business about patients and schedules, but there were also more personal ones. Discussions of movies, books, memories of their days at university. The tone was warm and friendly, but not romantic, at least not obviously so. Have you been experiencing any health problems lately, Dr. Kingsley? Lamont tensed. I don't see how that's relevant to the investigation. Just answer the question, please. I'm healthy. His answer came too quickly, too emphatically. Cobb noticed the doctor nervously rubbing his wrist, a gesture he had seen before in people hiding something important. Are you sure? No unusual symptoms? No tests you've had recently? Lamont stood up, his patience clearly wearing thin. Detective, I'll answer any questions you have about Tamika and our friendship. But my health is my own business. If you have specific suspicions, state them directly. Cobb also stood up. All right, Dr. Kingsley. I don't have any more questions at this time. But I may need to talk to you again. Of course. Lamont handed him his business card. Here's my contact information. And detective, find whoever did this. Tamika was special. She didn't deserve this. After Dr. Cobb left, he lingered in the break room, reviewing his notes. The visit to the clinic had raised more questions than it had answered. His intuition told him that Dr. Kingsley was hiding something, though it wasn't necessarily related to the murder. His thoughts were interrupted by a phone call from a colleague at the station. Cobb here. Detective, we have an interesting development with Jabari Devereaux. During questioning, he broke down and started shouting that damn doctor stole his wife and that the child couldn't be his. Cobb sat up straight. Did he confess to the murder? No, but he's clearly not in control of his emotions. And there's something else. We checked his alibi. His brother says he didn't see him until after 1 a.m., and Jabari was very agitated, and no one saw him at Jimmy's bar that night. Interesting. Keep him there. I'll be right over. Cobb gathered his notes, glancing one last time at the bulletin board, with the photo of Tamika and Dr. Kingsley standing side by side. Something about this story still didn't add up, and he was determined to get to the bottom of the web of lies, jealousy, and old secrets. The morgue at Baltimore City Hospital greeted Detective Cobb with sterile silence and the sharp smell of disinfectant. Dr. Janice Williams, a medical examiner with 20 years of experience, was waiting for him at the entrance to the autopsy room, holding a tablet with the autopsy results. Detective, she nodded, I have some results you need to know about immediately. They went into a small office with anatomical charts and certificates hanging on the walls, and folders piled high on the desk. The cause of death has been confirmed as asphyxiation due to strangulation, Dr. Williams began. Time of death was between 10:30 and midnight. There are minimal signs of a struggle, which suggests that the victim either knew the attacker and did not expect aggression, or was taken by surprise. Anything under the fingernails? Asked Cobb. Yes, skin samples have been sent for DNA analysis. The results will be back in 24 hours. Dr. Williams paused and opened another file on her tablet. But there's something else. Toxicology and serology tests confirmed the presence of HIV in the victim's blood. Judging by the evidence, the infection occurred relatively recently, possibly 3 to 4 months ago. Cobb nodded thoughtfully. We found an unopened envelope with the test results. It appears she was unaware of her status. That's consistent with my observations. Dr. Williams turned the page. As for the pregnancy, it's a male fetus, approximately 21 weeks, with no visible developmental abnormalities. Fortunately, the virus has not yet been transmitted to the child. No traces of infection were found in the placenta. Was the child healthy? Cobb asked. As far as we can tell at this stage, yes, it was developing normally. Cobb made a note in his notebook. Is there any way to determine how long ago the HIV infection occurred? Not to the day, no. But based on the antibody levels and viral load, I would say it happened in the last 3 to 4 months. Strange that she didn't know, by the way. Healthcare workers are usually tested regularly. The clinic had problems with the autoclaves used to sterilize instruments, Cobb said thoughtfully. About 3 months ago. Dr. Williams raised her eyebrows. That could explain the infection. If unsterile instruments were used during medical procedures. She shook her head. Terrible negligence. Thank you, doctor. Keep me posted on the DNA tests. Leaving the morgue, Cobb headed for the police station, where Jabari Devereaux was still in the interrogation room. On the way, he received a call from one of the officers checking the suspect's alibi. Detective, we've reviewed the surveillance footage from the cameras near Devereaux's house. Jabari did return home at 11:05 p.m. and left around midnight, just as the neighbor said. His car was also spotted near the Hope Clinic at 9:30 p.m. It looks like he was following her. Was Dr. Kingsley at the clinic at that time? Yes, he had evening appointments until 10 p.m. At the station, Cobb first went to the room where the evidence was kept. Jabari Devro's phone had been confiscated and examined by the tech department. Lieutenant Harris, a digital forensics specialist, met Cobb with a tablet in his hands. "Found anything interesting?" the detective asked. "You bet." Harris opened the Notes app on Jabari's phone. "Take a look at this. The note is dated the day before yesterday." Cobb looked at the screen. Kingsley's address, Patterson Park, East Baltimore Street, 27, apartment 3. Schedule, clinic until 10:20, then home. Day off, Wednesday. Car, black Lexus, license plate MDX 4592. "He was following the doctor," Cobb muttered. "And that's not all," Harris continued, scrolling further. "In the browser search history, how to find out who a child belongs to, signs of a cheating wife, can a stethoscope suffocate a person?" Cobb shook his head. He planned everything. What about the messages? The correspondence with Tamika over the last 2 weeks has been tense. He kept asking where she was and who she was with. Here, look at this string of messages from the day before yesterday. "Jabari, where are you? Why aren't you answering your calls?" "Tamika, I'm at work, you know. We have a difficult case." "Jabari, with him?" "Tamika, Jabari, stop it. We've already talked about this. Lamont is just a colleague and a friend." "Jabari, I saw you smiling when you were talking to him on the phone. You never smile at me like that." "Tamika, that's ridiculous. I have to work." "Jabari, he's the father, isn't he? That's why you've been so happy lately?" "Any response to the last message?" Cobb asked. "No. Looks like she didn't answer." Cobb rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "What about Dr. Kingsley? Did you find anything on him?" Harris opened another file. "We ran him through the medical database, and here's something interesting. 2 weeks ago, he got tested for HIV at a private clinic on the other side of town, not at Hope. The result was positive." "2 weeks ago?" Cobb repeated. "So he knew about his status before Tamika did." "It looks like it. And there's something else. His medical records mention a small cut during surgery 3 months ago, around the same time the autoclaves were having problems." The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place in Cobb's mind. He thanked Harris and headed for the interrogation room, where Jabari Devro had been sitting for several hours. Tamika's husband looked exhausted. His eyes were red, either from tears or a sleepless night, and his hands trembled as he picked up a glass of water. "Mr. Devro," Cobb began, sitting down opposite him, "I want you to tell me the truth about what happened last night." Jabari swallowed. "I've already told you everything." "No, you lied. Surveillance cameras recorded you at your house at 11:05 p.m. and at the Hope Clinic at 9:30 p.m. you were following your wife and Dr. Kingsley." Jabari lowered his head. "I just wanted to know the truth." "What truth?" "About them, about the child." His voice trembled. "I saw them talking, laughing. She changed after he appeared. She became distant, and then suddenly she got pregnant, even though we had been trying unsuccessfully for years." "And you decided that the child was Dr. Kingsley's?" "Who else could it be?" Jabari smiled bitterly. "Tamika and I tried for 3 years, and then just a couple of months after this a doctor showed up, she gets pregnant. What a coincidence, right?" Cobb watched the suspect closely. "What happened last night, Jabari?" There was a long pause. Jabari looked at his hands as if he saw something there that wasn't there. I came home earlier than usual. She wasn't expecting me. She was talking on the phone, smiling. With him, I know. When she saw me, she said goodbye quickly. I asked who it was. She said a colleague from work. Always a colleague." His face contorted. "We had a fight. I accused her of cheating on me, said I knew about her and Kingsley. She denied everything, screamed that I was crazy, that the child was mine. I didn't believe her." "What happened next?" "I left. I went to a bar and drank a lot. Then I decided to talk to her again. I got home around 11. He hesitated. She was lying in bed reading. She saw me and started screaming for me to leave, that she didn't want to see me. I lost it. I saw her stethoscope on the nightstand. She sometimes brought it home. I don't even remember how it happened. I only remember her eyes. So wide, so surprised." Jabari covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I loved her. I swear to you, I loved her. I just couldn't bear the thought that she and my child, that they weren't mine. Cobb listened silently to the murderer's confession, allowing him to speak. After that, I panicked. I tried to revive her, but it was too late. I didn't know what to do. I got in the car and drove to my brother's house. I couldn't tell him the truth. I just said that Tamika and I had had a fight. Jabari, Cobb said slowly, you know that Tamika was HIV positive, right? Devereaux looked up, his face expressing genuine surprise. What? No, that's impossible. She had a test, and the results came back yesterday. She probably didn't know yet. Jabari fell silent, processing the information. So he infected her. That bastard infected my wife. No, Jabari. Dr. Kingsley is indeed HIV positive, but they both contracted it in an accident at the clinic. The autoclaves used to sterilize instruments broke down 3 months ago. Both Dr. Kingsley and Tamika were at risk of infection. I don't believe you. This is another lie. We'll check it out, Cobb said calmly. A DNA test on the fetus will determine paternity. If the child is yours, if the child is mine, Jabari echoed, his eyes widening at the realization of a possible mistake. At that moment, an officer entered the room and handed Cobb a note. The detective read it and looked at Jabari. The preliminary DNA analysis results from Tamika's fingernails just came in. They match yours, Jabari. We are formally charging you with the murder of Tamika Devereaux. Can I see Dr. Kingsley? Jabari asked unexpectedly. I need to talk to him. That's not possible, Cobb shook his head, but I'll let him know you wanted to talk to him. The detective stood up to leave, but Jabari called after him. Detective, if the child is really mine and Tamika didn't cheat on me, his voice broke. What have I done? Cobb didn't answer. Sometimes there are no answers to questions like that. 3 weeks later, Cobb sat in his office filling out the final paperwork on the Tamika Devereaux case. On his desk lay an envelope containing the results of the DNA test on the fetus. The test had determined that Jabari Devereaux was the biological father of the child with a probability of 99 9/10%. The office door opened and Lieutenant Morrison entered. Closing the case? He asked, nodding at the folder. Yes, Cobb replied. All the pieces are in place. Jabari Devereaux has pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. Given the circumstances, the prosecutor agreed to a deal. 25 years with the possibility of parole after 15. A tragedy in a vacuum, Morrison shook his head. I hear the Hope Clinic has launched an internal investigation into the autoclave malfunction. Yes, and not just an internal one. The Department of Health is also involved. Dr. Kingsley has resigned. Cobb sighed. You know what's ironic? The test showed that the child was indeed Jabari's. Tamika never cheated on him. Morrison whistled. What about HIV? The investigation confirmed that both Tamika and Dr. Kingsley were infected by faulty autoclaves. Kingsley cut himself during surgery, Tamika probably through contact with a contaminated instrument. They had no idea until recently. And Jabari killed her, thinking she had cheated on him. Jealousy, mistrust, misunderstanding. Cobb closed the folder. A chain of mistakes, each of which individually might not have led to tragedy, but together. He fell silent, thinking of Tamika Devereaux, her unborn son, Dr. Kingsley, who had lost his career, and Jabari, who would spend the next 25 years reflecting on his fatal mistake. You know, Cobb said, standing up, sometimes the worst crimes aren't committed out of malice or greed, but out of simple human misunderstanding. Morrison nodded, and they left the office together, leaving the folder with Tamika Devereaux's case closed. Another tragedy, another story that should never have happened. But it did, and all that was left was to learn the lessons and move on. That was the unwritten law of their profession. That was the unwritten law of life.